Has eugenics faded away with time, or has the pseudoscience morphed and cloaked itself under new auspices? Were some of the original founders of population control efforts themselves eugenicists? How and when did eugenicists shift from Galton-era ideas to Malthusian population control? While there are examples of eugenics still in practice in its pre-World War II form, eugenicists were forced to scale back rhetoric and reframe their ideas in the post-World War II world. Adolf Hitler's tyrannical actions embarrassed eugenicists in America enough for them to at least publicly change their ideas. Eugenicists who still held on to the discredited principles of eugenics now attach these ideas to environmentalism and population control in an attempt to carry on eugenics in a more veiled form. Malthusian population control was now emphasized. Several prominent families are responsible for funding and promoting eugenics in America, namely the Rockefeller, Carnegie, Harriman, and Osborne families. Two families, the Rockefellers and the Osbornes, are particularly significant. John D. Rockefeller Sr. contributed a large amount of money to build the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory in the early 1900s, which housed the Eugenics Records Office from 1910 to 1944. Rockefeller influence also spread overseas to Germany, where the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Psychiatry and the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Eugenics, Anthropology, and Human Heredity resided. Much of the money used to run these facilities came directly from Rockefeller. These institutes became centers for Nazi eugenics programs during the reign of Adolf Hitler. In 1932, the Third International Eugenics Conference was held in New York City. The conference was hosted by Henry Fairfield Osborn. It was during this conference that an honored guest from Germany attended. Ernst Rudin was elected by the conference attendees as president of the International Federation of Eugenics Organizations. Rudin went on to craft the policies that governed Adolf Hitler's genocide programs at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. Frederick Henry Osborn, the cousin of Henry Fairfield Osborn, praised the Nazis' eugenics programs as a vital experiment. Osborn wrote in 1937, "The German sterilization program is apparently an excellent one, although it is generally doubted whether equal or better results might not have been obtained by a voluntary rather than compulsory system. Taken altogether, recent developments in Germany constitute perhaps the most important experiment which has ever been tried." The influence of the Rockefeller family continued in 1945 when John D. Rockefeller Jr. donated the land upon which the United Nations stands in New York City. With the founding of the United Nations, the Rockefeller family heralded a new beginning for eugenics under the guise of population control. New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani introduced the attending audience at a 1994 Business Council for the United Nations to a short documentary regarding Rockefeller's influence in the founding of the UN.
To appreciate, preserve, and strengthen the achievements of the United Nations, to examine new challenges which require creative action, and most importantly, to chart a course for the future. In doing this, it is appropriate to reflect and to draw strengths from the early history of the United Nations. The Rockefeller family embodied the idealism of those years.
John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s early backing of the League of Nations in the 1920s demonstrated the Rockefeller family's commitment to international peaceful cooperation. Grants promoting investigations into the narcotics trade and the traffic in women and children, and his endowment of a League of Nations library were evidence of his moral and financial support. While the League of Nations floundered and ultimately failed, its ideals lived on.
At no time in history has there been a more important conference or a more necessary meeting than this one in San Francisco. You members of this conference are to be the architects of a better world. In your hands rests our future.
Out of the chaos of World War II had come a global brotherhood that carried within its legislative structure the seeds of world peace for the generations to come.
Nelson Rockefeller, a former member of the U.S. delegation to San Francisco, was appointed by New York City Mayor O'Dwyer to interest the UN in building on the 1939 World's Fairgrounds in Flushing Meadow. When the UN rejected this proposal, the Rockefeller family considered offering part of their own estate, Pocantico, and adjoining properties for the headquarters site. No decision had been made when the UN convened in the fall of 1946. The Rockefeller family was more concerned than ever with bringing the UN to New York City. News accounts from the period convey the atmosphere.
As the weary delegates of 54 nations prepare to end their meeting, the world takes stock of recent weeks, highlighted by the beginnings of cooperation. Hopeful signs are the unanimously passed resolution on armaments reduction and atomic controls. And there was big news in the last days as headlines told another story: the gift of a site by John D. Rockefeller Jr. for a permanent world capital in New York. Quickly accepted, the strip along Manhattan's East River is valued at $8.5 million. An ideal site for skyscraper headquarters, the 6-block area extends from 42nd to 48th Street.
The Rockefeller family formally presented its gift to the UN in March of 1947.
The future of this country and the lives of our children and our children's children are interwoven with the success of the United Nations. In it lies the hope of the people of the world. My father considers it a privilege to have had a part in the development of its permanent home. I'm glad to hand you, Mr. Lee, my father's check.
Thank you, Mr. Rockefeller. Mr. Rockefeller, Mayor Dwyer, the United Nations extends its sincere thanks to you and to your father for this magnificent gift. We intend to go ahead and create on the East River side a dignified and appropriate headquarters for the United Nations, which will stand for generations to come as a great monument to peace and security. Your family can be proud of its contribution to this cause.
Thank you very much.
The Rockefeller gift changed the course of history and brought the United Nations to New York City.
In 1952, John D. Rockefeller III, the oldest son of John D. Rockefeller Jr., founded the Population Council. The Population Council's stated goal is to seek better understanding of the problems related to population. The first president of the council was Frederick Henry Osborn, who was appointed by Rockefeller himself. Osborn was a prominent eugenicist who helped found the American Eugenics Society, which is now called the Society for the Study of Social Biology. Osborn headed the AES from 1946 to 1952, when he began to place greater emphasis on population control rather than eugenics, signaling the shift of post-World War II eugenicists. Osborn wrote in his 1968 book, The Future of Human Heredity, that eugenic goals are most likely to be attained under another name than eugenics. Before we examine recent examples of population reduction and control being carried out, there are other individuals who played an important role in this shift from eugenics to population control. Frederick Henry Osborn's nephew, Henry Fairfield Osborn, carried on the banner of population control. His 1948 book, Our Plundered Planet, covers many of the issues that environmentalists are concerned with today. Osborn states in the book that overpopulation will destroy the planet and that drastic measures must be taken to curtail population growth. He takes a moment to reflect on the savage nature of his outlined proposal, but states that it will have to be done. He writes, "Of course, as we all know, these are momentous days and many things can happen to check population growth, even including the devastating use of atomic bombs in a new war. It is difficult to adjust one's mind to the possibility that the present negotiations between nations could fail to prevent such a savage denial to the right to human existence, and that the problem of the pressure of increasing populations, perhaps the greatest problem facing humanity today, cannot be solved in a way that is consistent with humanity."